Hello, fellow humans. My name is Vlad Bunea. Today, I will answer the following question. What are the forces of capitalism? The more I try to understand what capitalism actually is, the more conflicting explanations I found. You have massive influencers like Karl Marx, who writes that capitalism is about the separation of classes in workers versus owners of capital. You have modern influencers like Jason Moore, who writes that capitalism is a social ecology where wealth is being accumulated by those with power. You have legal scholars like Katarina Pistor who write that the power of capitalism is in the legal structure behind it. And of course, you have the cohort of entrepreneurs who say that capitalism is about free markets where companies are supposed to compete for the benefit of society. All these narratives paint a very different picture, so I decided to classify them into three big categories before my head exploded from so much confusion. These categories are the descriptive level of analysis, the scripted level of analysis, and the interpretative level of analysis. The descriptive level is talking about capitalism through the lens of daily experience. It's what you read in books like The Working Class History. Here's an example. December 5th, 2008. Workers at the Republic Windows and Doors manufacturer in Chicago began a sit-down strike against layoffs without compensation. The strike was one of the first to occur in the fallout of the 2008 financial crisis and won widespread support. The strike ended with compensation and all staff keeping their jobs. Every time you read in the news about a strike, a labor conflict, mass layoffs, unemployment, you read a descriptive analysis of capitalism. This is how capitalism is experienced by the working class, by consumers, every day. You can talk about capitalism only by referring to these examples, without the need to ever go to Karl Marx or Karl Polanyi or Thomas Piketty. You can just talk about how high unemployment is, how high is inflation, and stop at that, and you will get a pretty good picture of what capitalism is. The next level of understanding capitalism is the scripted level of analysis. This is beginning to be a bit abstract and detached from daily experience. This level is about how capitalism is coded into law, into contracts, into algorithms, and into corporate culture. This level is about what is written down. That's why I call it scripted. As legal scholar Katarina Pistor has showed, the law has evolved to write down all the rules required by capitalism in order to make it function and expand. These rules protect the interests of capitalism and are made to be used in courts and tribunals. Capitalism has put in a lot of effort over the centuries to create laws that served its interest, from special privileges such as subsidies and tax cuts, to free trade agreements such as the USMCA and even trade tariffs. Another example of a scripted analysis of capitalism are the platform algorithms, which are also written down in computer code. These algorithms are meant to control human behavior, as Shoshana Zuboff has showed in her book Surveillance Capitalism. The best example of this is how your behavior on any online platform, from X to Instagram to YouTube, is influenced by the owner of the algorithm. If you say something that is not allowed, you will be banned. If you say something against the system, such as you will be blacklisted. This can happen also to those who are capitalists themselves. They are also being influenced how to behave. Free speech on these platforms is not managed democratically by the public, but it is administered privately by the owner of the algorithm, even if sometimes it may happen that it actually serves the public good when, for example, a Nazi is banned from a platform. The next level of understanding capitalism is the interpretative level. This is the most abstract level, the most difficult to understand. This is where you get difficult phrases like this one. By dealing with the relationship between ecology and reification, it becomes necessary to displace the focus of the critique of political economy from social and economic forms to the material dimensions of the world. The material dimensions undergo various discrepancies and disharmonies precisely as a result of economic form determinations. I am not going to translate into human English what this quote means because it is beyond the purpose of this video. I realized all these narratives have their own truths. They each offer something for the complete understanding of what capitalism is. This is not to diminish the importance of fancy theory or complicated interpretations. They play their important role, but I was looking to find which of these analyses is directly connected to human behavior, which one actually explains how human behavior operates under the influence of capitalism. I found that the scripted level has direct causal force on human behavior. Let us think about two examples: our behavior at the workplace and our behavior online. Our behavior at the workplace is very strictly regulated by the employment contract, by what our managers tell us we can do or what we cannot do and what we must do, by the culture of the company, from how we must dress, what words we can use by the water cooler and in the elevator, how we must not criticize management, and even what political opinions we can manifest outside work. All these rules are written down in one way or another and shape our behavior directly. These written rules are the most clear and direct causal force that determines the behavior of workers. Wait, but it does not end here. Online, we are subjected to even more written rules. They come from the terms and conditions that nobody reads and everybody must sign. They come from the algorithms that determine what videos you get to see on YouTube, what words you can say and cannot say on Twitch, what ads you get to see. The algorithms are more subtle. They change our behaviors without us even noticing, and they are responsible for creating our addiction to platforms. They are responsible for making us think that popularity is something to be desired. They made us think that buying fashion goods elevate our social status. They created the anxious generation, as described by psychologist Jonathan Haidt. I would even argue that capitalism, as it is experienced today by working people, by consumers, and even by individual capitalists themselves, is no longer caused by abstract theory or ideology. It is directly caused by whatever happens to be written down. The scripted level, where we have all the laws, contracts, algorithms, norms, rules, is what drives ideology, not the other way around. Simply because economic agents are exposed first to the scripted level of capitalism and not to the interpretative level, where you have all those abstract economic theories that are detached from reality. When I suggested the threefold model of capitalism, I was inspired by narratives of all these written rules. I found that these scripted rules manifest themselves in three forces, which I also call doctrines or principles, that connect the legal components of capitalism, which are power, property, and capital. As you have seen in my previous videos, these forces are proportionality, dispossession, and hierarchies. As my research progresses, I'm going to unpack each one of these 6 elements in detail and explain its origins and how they operate in the present. As a quick recap for those new to the channel, proportionality is about having power in proportion to property, such as the one share, one vote principle. Dispossession is about removing property from its owner with or without consent to transform it into capital. And hierarchies is about how corporations are managed undemocratically by unelected executives. For the time being, I will only highlight the fact that the legal components of capitalism, power, property, capital, are very well covered since the time of Adam Smith, David Ricardo, and Karl Marx, all the way to the present. One recent very interesting narrative that belongs to the interpretative level is the capital as power interpretation, or CASP, that was put forward by Jonathan Nitzan and Shimshon Bickler. According to this interpretation, capitalism is only about the accumulation of power through the capitalization of companies. Nothing else is more fundamental according to this theory. Capitalization means the future expectation of capital returns or profits, which is completely separate from the current market value of companies. CASP goes as far as to dismantle Marx's labor theory of value. This shows us how many competitive interpretations we can have about capitalism. However, none of them act as causal forces because they are not scripted, they are not written down in rules. Only what is written down, I argue, has a causal force on behavior. So we have three forces: proportionality, dispossession, and hierarchies. Three legal constituents of capitalism: power, property, capital, and one core incentive or the core motive for the behavior of economic agents, which acts as the background where all this happens. This is the growth incentive or the accumulation of capital. With these 7 elements in total, we have a complete understanding of what capitalism is and how it works. Now we can deal with a huge range of symptoms of capitalism. These symptoms are represented by the behavior of economic agents when those forces are applied to them. These symptoms are what happens on the market: the stock market, the real estate market, the financial markets, how labor conflicts erupt and are settled, how trade policy is determined, how much a CEO is paid, how much property is acquired or created by corporations, and so much more. This line of thinking lands us on an interesting conclusion that capitalism cannot be fundamentally phased out if we do not phase out the causal forces that make it function. And since these three forces, proportionality, dispossession, hierarchies, are hard-coded in the scripted level of capitalism, any revolutionary change must happen in the scripted level first. In other words, the laws, the rules, the contracts, the algorithms that control the behaviors of economic agents, the working class, and ordinary people in general must be replaced by other written rules. Another conclusion is that changes in the descriptive level cannot overthrow capitalism. Anything that has to do with the daily experience of capitalism, from labor strikes to consumer boycotts, is not powerful enough to change capitalism because it does not happen in the scripted level. Certainly, a general strike can lead to changes in law, no doubt about it. But if it does not lead to changes in law, all strikes remain futile, even if they are successful in their petty demands, such as an increase in salaries by 20% or whatever additional benefits. These ain't enough to overthrow capitalism. For these reasons, labor unions and environmental movements must aim much higher if they want to overthrow capitalism. More specifically, they must demand changes in the scripted level. The next conclusion is that changes in the interpretative level cannot overthrow capitalism either. This is usually the works of academics, researchers, and intellectuals who write often fancy books and theories about capitalism that ordinary people never read and never understand. Jason Moore's book, Capitalism in the Web of Life, Ecology and the Accumulation of Capital, and John Bellamy Foster's The Dialectics of Ecology, Socialism and Nature, are just two random examples from thousands. Even about Karl Marx himself, very few Marxists have read volume 2 or 3 of Das Kapital. Why? It is damn difficult language. This is also the reason why the Communist Manifesto did not overthrow capitalism. Only the Russian Revolution of 1917 did that, but it lasted until 1991, while millions of lives were lost under Stalin's genocidal regime. The next conclusion is that changes in the scripted level can actually overthrow capitalism. Changes in law, rules, contracts, algorithms will not only allow behaviors to take different paths, but will also reshape the relations between the legal elements of power, property, and capital. These changes in rules obviously require taking political power and reforming the democratic process. And even more, changes in the scripted level can modify ideology because they are the primary causes for behaviors. And ideology is a product of human thinking and human behavior. Under contemporary capitalism, we get to ideology only after being exposed to the influence of written rules, laws, and algorithms. Ideology does not come first. Maybe it did before the internet, and even that is debatable, but it does not anymore. Ideology is now secondary in the causal hierarchy because ideology is now an expression of something that has happened in the scripted level. In fact, we can easily notice how researchers react with an interpretation only after a new algorithm was developed, only after a new law was passed. If we really want to beg the question, but where do these written rules come from? We can find that their source is nothing other than something that was already scripted before, determined by one of the three forces. Example, why does Mark Zuckerberg want to connect the entire world with Facebook? Because the design of capitalism had determined him to think he can do it with the right combination of power, property, and capital. Zuckerberg's motivation? Growth without limit, of course. If humanity ever moved to Mars, he would want to expand to Mars as well. He doesn't even have to be motivated by ideology, by some high-level interpretation of capitalism. He doesn't even have to read any free market evangelist from Milton Friedman, Friedrich Hayek, Ludwig von Mises. He only needed to know how to code computers very well and how to use corporate law to own the most shares in Facebook. And that's it. The forces of capitalism have grown to cover all of Earth. I argue that all human behavior that has a material footprint, meaning dealing with energy, materials, consumption, money, is caused by capitalism. Greta Thunberg was right when she made the connection between the climate crisis to capitalism.
We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you?
I'm just catching and previewing my future research with this video. I am prepared to back up my analysis with more facts. You can also help if you are interested with your questions and comments, because I'm looking to make this research as interactive and as transparent as possible, even before I publish it officially in journals. With your help, I also aim to put all these in a future book, which I will tentatively title Forces of Capitalism, Confusions, Delusions, and Manipulations of a Failing Ideology. Even if I continue to get under 1,000 views for these videos, I will still make them because some of you reached out to me in private to tell me they found these videos helpful. I know these videos are openly against the business model of Google, so until Google is nationalized and becomes the common property of the people under full democratic control, I have no choice but to continue to be a slave to the mysterious algorithm. But whether capitalists like it or not, people are rising up to support Palestine, to call out greedy billionaires, to demand the end of austerity, to stop the climate crisis. Millions are taking to the streets in spite of these big corporations, in spite of corrupt and coward governments. The days of capitalism are numbered. I invite everyone to be on the right side of history. Please share this video outside YouTube, on Facebook, on X, on Truth Social, on Reddit, wherever there are humans, to help with the organic growth of the revolution. And thank you for supporting me on Patreon. $5 a month goes a long way, believe me, so I really appreciate all your contributions. This research is not possible without your support. Let us replace capitalism with an economy for life. Increase the peace.